Our first speaker is Fiona. I'm actually going to introduce Gary first, because otherwise I'll be repeating myself and introducing Fiona and then doing so again when she starts. So our second speaker will be Gary Ramsay, who's joining us from the University of Aberdeen. Gary is he's just finished his 4th year, so he's about to enter his final year as a medical student at the University of Aberdeen. And Gary is essentially going to provide a student perspective on the course with a session titled Why Medicine. But our first speaker is Fiona Cairns, and Fiona, feel free to get your presentation ready if that helps, just when I'm introducing you. Fiona is joining us from St George's, University of London. And Fiona's session is going to look at loads of aspects of medicine. So it's going to look at applications, it's going to look at entry, it's going to look at work experience. It's also, Fiona's also going to look at things like personal statements, interviews and things as well. So a whistle-stop tour, but very, very handy nonetheless. So without further ado, if I can pass to Fiona, please, our first speaker. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, John. So yeah, so as John said, so my name's Fiona. I work at the St George's University of London. So if you haven't heard of us before, essentially we're a small specialist healthcare university based in Tooting in southwest London, and we're based on the site of St George's Hospital, which you may know if you watch 24 Hours in A&E on TV. And yeah, we're a small specialist, so we only offer medicine, healthcare and science courses. And as John said, this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour, so I won't be able to focus for very long on many different kind of areas of applying for medicine, but hopefully this will just kind of give you a kind of overview of things you need to think about. Okay. So I wanted to just start off by, I guess, just giving an overview of the next year. So if you're thinking about applying for 2021 entry, then I suppose this slide is designed to tell you just things that you need to start thinking about. So work experience, lots of medical schools will ask for relevant work experience, and really that's something that hopefully you might have already have, but certainly thinking about what you can do now. Work experience is really relevant to get up until interviews most of the time, I would say. You might also have to think about admissions tests as well. You usually take these in the year of application, but it's really important to know beforehand which tests you need to take and what sittings you might need to take. And so actually you might take those before the 15th of October UCAS application deadline or afterwards, it depends which test. 15th of October deadline is obviously the UCAS early deadline for applying for medicine courses. Interviews, most medical schools do interview, and usually interviews will run sometime between November and March, so after the application deadline. And then after that, that's usually when you would have an offer. So lots of the time that offer to candidates would be based on interview performance, usually conditional on academic grades as well. So that's just to give an overview of, I suppose, things that you need to start thinking about. So first of all, I just want to talk a bit about academic entry requirements. So it's quite hard to speak for, I can't obviously speak for all medical schools, but I'm trying to give an overview. So it's really important to know that, you know, chemistry and biology in terms of A-level or equivalents are usually what universities are looking for, but not all universities will want both of those subjects. Some might just want one of those sciences. Some universities might ask that you have maths as well, or potentially they might want a humanities subject alongside a science course. So it really does depend on different universities. Don't make any assumptions. It's about doing your research to find out what, you know, courses you can apply for with the subjects you have. Different universities will take different alternative qualifications. So there are things like IB, there are things like maybe access courses in foundation years. And some universities will accept different courses or might have pre-medical courses that they accept as well. But again, it can be very particular to the university as to what they'll accept. GCSEs can be important as well, and because medicine is such a, you know, a competitive course, there's often 10 people applying for each place. You know, often their grades are very, very high, or they can be high, and that can sometimes be the case with GCSEs as well. At some universities, your GCSEs can be just as important as A-levels or equivalent if you're applying. So for example, at St George's, you need to meet our A-level and GCSE requirements to be considered for interview. Okay. Might not be the case at all universities, but it's just good to kind of, I guess, know that some might be looking at your GCSEs as well. It's really important when you're doing your research to only apply for courses where you're likely to meet the academic requirements. And it sounds kind of obvious, but when you apply through UCAS for medicine, when you apply through UCAS, you have 5 course choices, but only 4 of them can be for a medicine course. So it's really important to be selective and make an informed decision and being realistic. So only applying for courses where you know that you do meet or you're likely to meet the academic requirements. Lots of universities will ask for admissions tests as well. So the most common one is the UCAT, which is the clinical aptitude test. I think about 6 or 7 universities ask the BMAT. Now these tests are different. So UCAT has a number of different sections, and it's not, because it's looking at aptitude, it's looking at things like your reasoning, your logic, and things like that. So it's not looking for knowledge per se. Whereas the BMAT, I think there's an essay section, and that there is an element of scientific knowledge in there. So they're very, very different tests. And again, it's worth checking in advance, far in advance if you need to take a test. So you take these tests at different points in the year, and you have to look on particular websites and book your test in advance, okay? So again, it's about doing that research at an early stage so that you're not stopped from applying to a university that you want to because you didn't take the right test. So there are websites for both of these tests, and I'd really advise you to go on, if you haven't already, and look at those tests, find out a bit more about them and how they work and scoring and so on. And practicing is the best way to kind of get yourself familiar with these tests. It can be a bit tricky for the UCAT because actually you can't revise for that test because it's not asking for particular knowledge, but it is possible to practice. And it's really important with that UCAT in particular, I think, to kind of do the questions, get a sense of the type of questions that you're being asked, and also to try and do the test in advance, like do a test one in timed conditions, because they are timed. So you need to make sure that you're answering as many questions as you can in that time. It is unfortunate, but you do have to pay to take both of these tests, but bursaries are available. So do look on both of the test websites to see if you might be eligible for a bursary. And again, be aware that the universities use these tests in different ways as well. So some universities might say, okay, we're looking for particular scores in the tests, and you can only get an interview if you meet the particular scores we're looking for. So that's what we do at George's. We ask for the UCAT, and you do need to meet particular UCAT scores in order to get an interview. But other universities might say, actually, you don't need it. We're not looking for a particular score, but we kind of look at your score in conjunction with your grades and work experience and stuff like that. So again, do your research beforehand and see what universities you can apply for, with the test results that you get. So I am going to talk a bit about, the changes to, the medicine applications process throughout in terms of, what's happened around COVID-19. So with UCAT, what's happened is that this year they've kind of pushed the deadlines back slightly. So you can register to take the test now, and UCAT you can take between, I think it's the beginning of August to the beginning of October. You can register from now to do it, and they are encouraging people to register early on to avoid complications. So again, book your test in now if you think you're going to be applying to universities that ask for UCAT. BMAT is a bit different because they have different sittings in different months throughout the year. So they have cancelled the September sitting of that test, but the November sitting is still going ahead. So I'd really encourage you to go onto those, both those test websites, and if you can, subscribe to updates and just keep an eye on what's going on with those 2 tests as you're thinking about what unis you might want to apply to going forward. So work experience. So lots of universities will ask for relevant work experience. And again, different unis might have slightly different requirements around this, and they might be looking for slightly different things from your work experience. So again, checking university websites is really important. But I do want to emphasize that it's not about kind of shadowing a doctor, and most universities will not specifically be wanting you to get shadowing experience. Okay, there are lots of other things that you might have done before that will be relevant. So I just want to kind of get that out of the way. Again, just going to talk in a second about COVID-19 and issues around work experience now. But if you've been able to get what you think is relevant work experience before, there's a wide range of things that can be relevant. So I often like to tell people that working with people in need of care, if you're working with people in need of care, then it's probably going to be relevant to your medicine application. That could be in a care environment, so in a hospice, care home, doing community work might be relevant. So things like volunteering with homeless people, working in a food bank, volunteering with disabled people or elderly people. children or teaching can be relevant, as can supporting family. And very often it's down to what you actually did in your experience and what you learned from it, and if it's relevant to medicine, and can you tell universities and show them how that's relevant to medicine. That's what we're looking for. Universities with work experience, it's not usually a case of like ticking a box, okay? It's about getting that experience to give you an insight into the field and what it's like working with people in need of care. And universities will very often want to know what you've learned from your work experience and want you to reflect on it, and that's what they're looking for, and that's what they want to hear from candidates. I have put in part-time jobs in group sports in here as well, because although they're not really working with people in need of care, doing things like that can be useful for medicine application if you can demonstrate that you've learned key skills and qualities from undertaking those experiences that are relevant to healthcare. Okay. So in terms of COVID-19 and changes, so we know that lots of young people who are wanting to apply for medicine might have had placements and things lined up that may have been cancelled. It's really important to know that universities, medical schools are aware of this, okay? So, you know, we know that lots of people are in this situation where they're not going to be able to get the same experience that they've had before. And lots of universities are going to be relaxing their requirements as a result, so including St. George's. So we have put up a statement on our website saying, you know, we're relaxing the work experience requirements going forward because we know that you can't get them. However, for candidates who are wanting to apply to healthcare courses, which usually ask for work experience, we still want you, and we expect people to be able to demonstrate and give insight into the role of a doctor and have an understanding of what it's like working in that profession. So what lots of universities and the Medical Schools Council, in fact, are encouraging people to do is to try and think about other things you can do in the meantime. Because if you think about work experience as really giving you an insight into the profession, there's loads of ways that you can do that without actually getting hands-on experience. So it could be doing things like looking at online resources, reading books, watching interviews with people, listening to podcasts. So do go and have a look at the Medical School Council website for some more information on alternative things that you can be doing. But I think it's very helpful at this point just to think about, you know, what can you be doing now to, you know, gain further insight into the medical profession and what it's like working in healthcare. Okay. So moving on to the personal statement, again, this forms part of your UCAS application, so you have to do it anyway. But with the personal statement for medicine, it's important to know that not all universities will look at the personal statement or assess it. And if they do, they might be looking at it at different stages. So they might be looking at it before interview or at an interview, or they might not use it at all. So for example, at St. George's, we don't actually assess the personal statement prior to interview. When we select candidates for our medicine course, we're looking at their academic requirements and their UCAT scores. And if you meet those, you get an interview, but the personal statement does not form part of that assessment. And I think it's really useful for people to know and to get an understanding of how the universities that are applying for will be using the personal statement and at what stage they're looking at that. So because we don't look at the personal statement, I'm not going to give like loads of tips about it, but I think it's really important to check individual uni websites for more guidance, because different unis might be looking for different things in your personal statement. So you need to make sure you're aware of those beforehand. And it's really about using it to demonstrate your understanding of the profession, why you're a good candidate, but you do have to be very selective about what you include, because you have got, you know, a limited word count. So you really have to make every word count and make sure that every sentence you put in there is important and it is kind of giving a key point, if that makes sense. It's obviously really important to, you know, write your statement yourself and have it come from you, but also do get feedback from lots of people as well as you go along. So do get feedback from friends, family, teachers, and so on as you go. Okay, so moving on to interviews. So almost all medical schools interview, and there are lots of different types of interviews that medical schools use. So it could be a panel interview where you're sat opposite, you know, 2, 3, 4 people, you're kind of chatting back and forth. Could be a group interview where you're interviewed alongside other candidates, or it could be an MMI, so a multi-mini interview. And lots of medical schools are using MMIs these days. That's what we use at St. George's. And just to give you a quick idea of what that actually is, essentially, as in the title, it's a series of mini interviews. So you can see on the big picture on my slide, that's a picture of the MMI setup at St. George's. So you have a number of little stations and you have an interviewer in each. So you go into the first station, you have a 5-minute interview, a buzzer goes, you come out, you go into the next station, and you have another 5-minute interview with a different interviewer. Okay, and you kind of go around the stations like that. So at George's, ours lasts about 45 minutes, but again, timings and things like that will differ at different universities. So again, just doing research in advance in terms of, what format the interview will take, what the university are looking for. Lots of unis will, share that information with you in terms of, what they're looking for from candidates and, about the format of their interview and potentially even, example questions, so you can kind of familiarize yourself with what's going to happen beforehand. Again, some interviews might be personalized to you and some might be more structured. So it might be that at some interviews, the interviewers have got your personal statement. They might even sit there and ask you particular questions based on what you've said in your personal statement. But in other interviews, they might be really structured. So at George's, our interviews are really, really structured. So the interviewers know nothing about you apart from your name, because it's, you've got a little name tag on, and they haven't read your personal statement beforehand. So at George's, you're literally being just assessed on the information that you share during the interview. Okay, but like I say, in other interviews, you might have the opportunity to talk more about your personal statement and so on. So it's really important to kind of know this beforehand and to get an idea of, what do you need to say, because the interviewers won't know otherwise, if that makes sense. Again, really important to prepare, but not over-prepare for interviews. Do find out about them as much as you can, like I've said. In terms of COVID-19 changes, so lots of universities, obviously the application deadline is the 15th of October, and lots of universities will be interviewing between November and March. So I imagine that lots of other universities like George's are considering, how they're going to run their interviews this year. Might they go to remote online interviews instead? So do be reassured that, planning is still going ahead in universities for how these might operate, and obviously universities will release more information about that near the time, but it's a bit of a wait and see for that at the moment. So I just want to include this slide because I think it's the thing is with medicine applications, it's really, really complicated. You've got so many different things to think about. So I just want to include one nice slide that kind of encompasses it all. So you've got to think about things like entry requirements, admissions test, work experience, personal statement, interviews, but also be thinking about, what university you want to apply to, what course, what institution, and all those things will kind of make up, I guess, your choices. So there's quite a lot of work to do over the next few months, I think, if you want to do medicine, because it's really kind of complicated process. But I think, doing your research on entry requirements far in advance is really important, and trying to be quite organised and strategic in terms of where you're applying. So only apply to places that you are pretty sure will accept you in terms of your predictions and your grades and things. Being realistic and being very organised, like I say. So know what you're going to have to do and when you have to do it by in terms of deadlines. In terms of choosing universities and courses, I'm sure Gary will talk a bit more about this, but courses are all different. They have different structures, and obviously different universities can offer different things in terms of location, their size, and just the kind of ethos and atmosphere of the institution. And we know it's really hard for people to make those choices at the moment because you can't go to a university. But lots of unis are running, virtual events, virtual open days. So do attend those events. And I think the most important thing is to talk to current students if you can, because they are the people that will be able to give you that, excuse me, insight into what a course is really like and what an institution's really like. So do try and talk to current students online, open days, during webinars and things like that if you can. And again, in terms of work experience, I would say, looking into other ways and what you can do now in terms of gaining insight into the medical profession is what you need to be doing. And I think later on after this session, Jon's going to be sharing some resources and links that might kind of give you some ideas of, different things you can pursue on websites you can look at and stuff afterwards. Cool, so that's pretty much from me. But yeah, thanks for listening. I hope that was useful, and I'm going to hand back to Jon now.
Thank you very much, Fiona. That was excellent. To cover so much in so little time is pretty incredible. So thank you very much. And let me introduce Gary. Just about to start his final year, so he's finished his 4th year at the University of Aberdeen. I'm sure Gary will tell you loads about his own journey, etc. So I won't say too much from there. So I'll pass straight to you, Gary, if I can, please. It's Gary Ramsay, just about to start his final year at the University of Aberdeen.
Hi everyone, as Jon's already said, my name's Gary, and I've just finished my 4th year at the University of Aberdeen, and all being well with my exams in 6 weeks' time, I'll hopefully start my final year at the end of August. So it's a real pleasure to have been asked to speak to you today about medicine. I love speaking to prospective students about medicine and the course and the future career. So I hope that this is an informative discussion for you. Okay, so I'll just get started with a quick outline of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'll give a quick introduction about myself, and then I'll talk through the course structure in terms of the topics that you're likely to get in medicine and how you learn it, because as Fiona's already mentioned, there's a different approach to teaching throughout the majority of medical schools across the UK. I'll then put that into practice with a walkthrough of what a day in the life of a medical student would be like from my perspective, and then I'll touch on placements, because placements, as you can imagine, take up a large part of your time in medical school. And then we'll finish off with some of the added bonuses of studying medicine. And then hopefully by the end of it, given the title of the talk, I'll be able to have convinced some of you to answer the question of why should you study medicine. Okay, just for starters, you guys. So I'm from Glasgow, but I'm studying in Aberdeen. So a quick question for everyone. How did I get here? Did I cycle? Did I walk? Did I take the train? Or did I take the car? If you have a quick think, you can maybe put it into the chat. But of course, this is just tongue-in-cheek, guys, isn't it? This is nothing to do with how I got to Aberdeen. The point I'm making here is there are many ways to get to where you want to be in life. And so just using my journey as an example, I grew up in Glasgow, went to school in Glasgow. Then finishing school, I went to University of Glasgow to study physics. Then after that, I realised I wanted to study medicine. So I applied to medical school, and I was unsuccessful with my application, so I put a big red stamp there on the application to medicine. So after that, I dusted myself down. I went down to King's College in London, and I did a master's degree in medical physics and clinical engineering. And then after that, I worked in the NHS for about 2.5 years on a graduate training programme to become a clinical scientist specialising in clinical engineering. But at this point, I still realised that no, I really do think that medicine is my true calling. So I reapplied in 2015 for 2016 start, and thankfully I was successful then, so I put a big green stamp on that at the end there. Of course, this talk isn't about me to talk about my experiences. It's more to kind of speak to anyone out there who maybe is at home thinking, okay, I've applied, I haven't got in first time, or I didn't quite get the grades in school, or I'm in another profession, or I might be an older student with kids. Is medicine really for me? And I just want to say that yes is the answer to that. Medicine caters for everyone. And just as an example, in our course, we've got a wide range of students, from school leavers to graduates to people that have been working in full-time employment, and even parents. And there's people in the course that are pregnant as well during their course. So medicine really is for anyone who really wants it, and I hope that gives you some reassurance from the start. Okay, so what do you learn in medicine? Well, this is the interesting part, isn't it? There's so much that you learn in medicine, but what do we learn? I think the first thing to say before I go any further is that, and kind of touching on what Fiona's already said, I think it's important to consider the fact that there are so many medical schools throughout the UK. When I first applied in 2015, I think there was over 30 at that point, and with the new medical schools that have been introduced in the last 4 years, I think there's close to about 40 medical schools in the UK. So what you learn and the order of which you learn it will vary across the medical schools, and how you learn it in terms of the different teaching styles. But I think what's still important to note is that despite that, you all come out at the end of medical school as a doctor, meeting the GMC, that's our General Medical Council, that's the regulatory body. You have to meet their standards, so you all come out at the same level. It might just be a different experience for you getting there. And I think you just have to identify with each medical school what best suits your learning style and learning needs. So using Aberdeen's course as an example of what you learn, I've got it up here in front of me. So five years in medical school, guys. In the first year, you start off with the basic sciences, like biochemistry, for example, and just a little bit about some common disease processes, like how inflammation works, for example, because that's in the majority of disease processes. And then later on in the first year, you actually start the medical systems. So you can see there, there's respiratory and the cardiovascular system. So you learn all about the heart and lungs in first year. And then moving into the second year, you've got a wide range of other bodily systems, from alimentary, which is your gastrointestinal tract, head and neck, dermatology, the nervous system, learning about the brain and spinal cords, and then finishing up with the urinary system and infection and the musculoskeletal, so like orthopedics. And then the last point in second year is medical ethics, which is a really important part to learn. Then moving into the third year, you'll learn the remaining systems of the body, so the reproductive systems, obstetrics, gynecology, psychiatry, and then hematology, so a little bit about leukemias, for example. So in Aberdeen, the majority of years 1, 2, 3 is lecture-based, but you also do get exposure to the hospital from essentially day one in Aberdeen, which was one thing that attracted me to the course, and that will vary across the UK. Some other medical schools might choose to do a traditional learning where you have full-time lectures, maybe years 1 to 3, and then you go into the hospital for the first time in the fourth year. As I say, in Aberdeen, you get that experience early on, which I think is great. So then years 1 to 3 is all your lectures, and then into the fourth year, and you're in the hospital full time, morning to night, 5 days a week. So I've just finished my fourth year, as I said there, and you get really exposure to all the specialties, medical specialties and all the surgical specialties, as you can see in green there. Then when you start the fifth and final year, you have to choose one medical specialty that you enjoyed, one surgical specialty. You then choose between either GP and psychiatry, and then you get to go on your elective, which is really, there's no limit to that. It's anywhere in the world for 8 weeks to do whatever you like within medicine, and we'll touch on that a little bit later, all right? So that's really a quick overview of what you learn in medicine, but how do you learn it? What are the teaching styles like in medicine? So again, as I said, there'll be different teaching styles across the UK, depending on what medical school you go to, but in Aberdeen, it's systems-based learning. So what does systems-based learning mean? Well, what it means is that you learn about different parts of the body one stage at a time. So for example, using the cardiovascular system as an example, in first year, we'll have our lectures on the anatomy and physiology of the heart. Then we'll learn about disease processes and the pathophysiology of what can go wrong with the heart. So for example, the disease processes of a heart attack, for example. Okay, and then once we've done that, we'll then move on to the next bodily system, like the respiratory system, the lungs, the anatomy and physiology of the lungs, and all the disease processes that take place there. Comparing that to other medical schools, they might adopt a more traditional approach, so you learn all of the anatomy and physiology of the body, head to toe first, before going into the diseases. And a third one I've got there is what we call problem-based learning. So some schools might choose to use problem-based learning, and that means you get put into small tutor groups, and rather than having all your information given to you in lectures, you get given a task or a problem to solve at the start of the week. It's up to you to go away, research that, and come up with the information and the knowledge to then report back at the end of the week. And so that's, again, a different learning style. It's really just about asking yourself what you think would be best suited to you. Okay, so lectures being the first way in which you learn a lot of your knowledge in medical school. How else? Anatomy. So anatomy, this has really been the highlight of my medical degree so far, the anatomy experience in the anatomy labs here. Anatomy can be dissection or prosection. So dissection is when you get to cut the cadavers yourself and explore them. And it's a real privilege actually learning the anatomy, because this is people who have donated their bodies to science, to medicine, for our benefit, and this is just family and people's loved ones. And as I say, a real privilege that we get exposed to that, and we get to interact with those cadavers. Prosection is when the cadavers have actually, specimens have already been dissected by the anatomy staff, and there's pros and cons to both learning styles, and we can maybe answer some of the questions on that if you have any in the chat afterwards. So that's lecture based. Then your anatomy sessions. What else do we have? Well, you've got your clinical skills, which you can appreciate is really important to allow you to practice the skills really required to be a doctor before going into the hospital in your later years. So what kind of things will you learn in clinical skills? Well, again, looking at that system, thinking of that systems-based approach, when you are learning the cardiovascular system, during the week, you'll come to the clinical skills room and you'll learn how to do things relating to the cardiovascular system. So for example, you can see the arm on the left-hand side there. You might learn how to take blood or how to measure someone's pulse. We've then got the mannequin here who you might learn how to do CPR on. You'll also see the blackout screen on the right-hand side. That's where behind that you have our tutors. You have your tutors standing, and they'll be controlling this mannequin. They might send them into a cardiac arrest, for example, and then you have to, go through the right protocol to try and resuscitate them. So that's the clinical skills side of things. And finally, we have our communication sessions. So communication, I think, is really one of the most pivotal aspects to being a doctor. And it's not just about communicating with your patients, it's also communicating with your colleagues as well. So the communication sessions, take place in our lovely medical school here in Aberdeen. And you come into tutor groups during the weeks, and we often have what we call patient partners in Aberdeen. This is often retired folk that give up their free time to come in and allow us to practice on them. Both from a communication point of view and from physical examinations as well. And it's really just to allow us to practice in that safe environment, allow us to make mistakes rather than going over to the hospital and making the mistakes on real patients. So that's the final way in which we learn the course and develop the skills to be a doctor. Okay, so putting all that into practice then, what would a day in the life of a medical student look like? So I pulled up a timetable from this is back in my second year when we were learning about diabetes and endocrinology. So endocrinology is relating to all the way in which the hormones can go wrong in the body. So Monday morning would start off with a couple of lectures, and then by Monday afternoon, you've got a clinical communication session, as I mentioned there. Tuesday, Wednesday take care of themselves, variety of lectures with afternoons off. And then you can see here on Thursday morning, we've got ward teaching in the hospital, and DOME stands for Department of Medicine for the Elderly. So like a geriatric ward where elderly folk are on. Later on the Thursday, we've got a clinical skills session. So here we learned how to do injections, the procedure for doing injections. And then we finish off Thursday with a session up in the anatomy lab. So I think just looking at the Thursday there in itself, I think that's a good example of all the things you'll learn. You'll start off with a lecture, you've then got your ward experience, another lecture, a small break, into clinical skills, learning how to do injections, another small break, and then into the anatomy to finish off the day. So lots of variety in one day, never mind a full week. So I hope that paints a picture of just what a day in the life of a medical student is like. So placements are a very important part of the course, and the one part I think you're always waiting for. You're in lectures, you're learning, but you're there to learn in order to go and apply it with patients on the wards. So placements is definitely a highlight of the course as well. And so what kind of placements can you look forward to? Well, of course, there's hospital-based placements. This is a nice picture of Aberdeen Royal Children's Hospital. You might spend time in the psychiatric hospital as well. You'll also spend a lot of time out in the GP practices, and for some of that experience in GP practices in the community, you might find yourself going out to patients' homes as well. There's more unique experiences as well. Like for example, in your psychiatric block, you might get the opportunity to go to prisons. And then, of course, with the being based in the northeast of Scotland, there's a remote and rural option to Aberdeen's course. I'm sure I think there's the same in Dundee. I can't speak for all the other medical schools, of course, but I'm sure there'll be options to go far and wide with various courses. But in Aberdeen, you've got this idea of remote and rural option, but I'll speak about that in just a moment. What kind of things can you look forward to on these placements? Well, really, you can get to do in terms of clinical skills, anything that you've been taught in the medical school and examined on that year. So each year, as you go through the different systems and learn more skills, you're adding, and you get examined on at the end of the year. As you go through more systems, you're adding to your repertoire of skills so that with each time you go into the wards, you can conduct more of those skills, of course, under supervision. But as I say, you're adding to your repertoire as you slowly go through medical school, developing that confidence as you go, and then you're able to apply that on the wards. So just touching on the remote and rural option, so northeast of Scotland, Aberdeen, and you've got the Scottish Highlands and Islands close by. So I chose to do my GP block in the fourth year in a remote and rural location, Alness and Invergordon. It's in the Scottish Highlands, about an hour north of Inverness, and I had a wonderful experience up there from a clinical point of view, because I have had the majority of my clinical teaching. This was halfway through my fourth year. I was able to conduct my own clinic with patients and then feed back to the GP afterwards. I was able to get involved with the newborn babies, their vaccination schedules, and all the flu jabs and things like that. So it was really great to just get to the senior years and really have that feeling of independence that you are slowly but surely getting to the stage of feeling competent to be a doctor, which was wonderful. And of course, the other benefit to having the remote and rural aspect in Aberdeen is that you have the beautiful scenery as well. This is a hill called Fireish in Invergordon, and that's the backdrop there as well. So it's great. I think we spent a weekend, we were there for 5 weeks, we spent a weekend across in Skye, and then we also climbed Ben Nevis with friends as well, went across to Fort William. So it was a great opportunity to spend some time up in the Highlands. So some other benefits of studying medicine from a social point of view, academically you can get involved in lots of different societies. So this year I'm the president for our surgical society, Ogston Surgical Society, and these are a couple of photos of a conference that we organised last year. It was a national undergraduate surgical conference, and we had people coming up from London, all over England, and the rest of the UK as well. So it was great to host that, and you can see just in the bottom right-hand corner here, that's us helping remove cysts from pig trotters. So you can look forward to getting involved in all sorts of social academic activities in medical school. And of course, there are other societies as well that you can get involved in. And of course, there's lots of time for fun from a social point of view as well. On the two photos on the right-hand side, this is us at our halfway ball. So this was halfway through our third year, celebrating halfway to becoming doctors. And for those that choose to come to the Scottish medical schools, this photo on the left here is us at a Burns supper. So you can look forward to celebrating Rabbie Burns night if you choose to come to the Scottish medical schools. What can you look forward to? Well, medicine has a large opportunity, lots of opportunities for getting involved in research. That research can be locally at the medical school during term time. It might be in the summers as well. You can also go and do research anywhere in the world, really. And the good thing about being a medical student is that you can contact people and you can knock on doors. You can say, look, I've got an interest in this. A medical student, can I come and do some work with you? And more often than not, people are happy to that, because as doctors, we're not just healers, but we're there to do research and educate as well. So it's a responsibility to get involved and then have people involved in that with you. And this on the left-hand side, you can also combine this with a love for travel. I've got a big love for travel. It's one of my greatest passions in life. And the photo on the left-hand side here was my girlfriend and I. My girlfriend is a medical student as well. And we went across to the Mayo Clinic. That's a hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, at the end of our first and second year to do some research in cardiovascular diseases. And of course, you've got the benefit of going travelling after that. And so here we are sitting on a ridge at the edge of the Grand Canyon in the bottom. The two top photos there, top right, this was a trip that my girlfriend and I went on last year, just backpacking through Southeast Asia. It wasn't related to medicine, but I've put it in for one reason, and that is that on the right-hand side, you'll see our friend in the middle of us here, Wei Wen. She's a Malaysian international. She's from Kuala Lumpur, and that was us in Kuala Lumpur with her. And, I've put that in just to show you that one of the huge benefits of studying, not just medicine, but going to university in general, is the fact that you will meet people from all different backgrounds and cultures from every corner of the earth. And I really think that that's one of the huge benefits of, coming to university just in general. So I thought it would be nice to put that in as well. And that was us in Halon Bay, in the middle one there. So taking all that into consideration, all the different experiences you can have in medical school, where you can go in the world, what you can choose to do as a career afterwards, I really do feel that the world is your oyster, and I would encourage you to think about applying to medicine if you wish. Just to finish off, on the point about travel, one of the big highlights of medical school is the elective in your final year. Now, this will vary again across the medical schools, but in Aberdeen, it's an 8-week block in your final year, and you get to go anywhere in the world to really do anything relating to medicine. So my girlfriend Lauren and I were due to go to Fiji in about 8 weeks' time. But of course, you guys might have heard of COVID. That has blocked us from going, so we won't be going to Fiji. So we'll be swapping the tropics of Fiji for Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland. But maybe down the line we'll get a trip if we're lucky. So my last slide for you guys. Why medicine? Well, I hope you're able to answer that a little bit more having listened to the talk from my point of view, the reason why I study medicine, really quite simply, is it is a huge privilege to study medicine. Not a privilege because you get to tell people I'm a doctor, but eventually it's a privilege because people will open up to you and they will tell you things about their life that they may not tell even their closest loved ones, but they'll tell you because you're a doctor or even because you're a medical student. And this can often be people who are vulnerable, scared, in pain. Same goes for their families. And they'll tell you some of the more intimate details, some of the most intimate details about their life, about their bodies. And it's a huge privilege that you're the one that gets to help them in that moment. And so lots of opportunities come with that, from helping them and finding out about their life. And therefore, it's a huge responsibility. And so I think it's always important just to acknowledge that because of that huge responsibility, it's always important to act in a way that really warrants that privileged position you're in. But that's certainly the one of the main reasons why I chose to study medicine. This was a quote from Noam Chomsky, an American philosopher, plus many other things that he said about, this wasn't related to medicine, but he said the more privilege you have, the more opportunity you have, and the more opportunity you have, the more responsibility you have. And I think that really sums up the career of medical school and as a doctor as well. So I'll finish off here, guys, and I'll be happy to answer any questions in the chat. But I hope this was informative for you and allowed you to hopefully make a more informed decision about applying to medical school. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all.